What's a non-Google welcome?
Well, first we have to ask you a icebreaker.
Okay.
And then it'll officially be a Google welcome.
Okay.
So Ari, could you please start us out with, what is the secret to a great sandwich?
Well, I don't think there's any secret. I think everybody knows the secrets. It's just you start with really good ingredients. It's just most people don't want to pay to buy really great ingredients. They want to use average ingredients, and it's impossible to make something great out of average. So I think that would be a really good start.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, great. So can you please go ahead and take us off with, who was Ari before Zingerman's? What's your story? And how did this amazing Ann Arbor infamous deli come to be what we know of it as today?
Well, it's a lot more than a deli. I guess I'm the same person I always have been. I think we just evolve, you know. I mean, in the same way Ann Arbor is the same town as it was 100 years ago. It just grows and evolves, and it's not a overnight change. It's just continue to learn. But anyway, I'm from Chicago. I grew up there, came up here to go to school. I went to U of M, studied Russian history, studied the anarchists. Most of you don't know, but we have the largest anarchist collection in the country. It is on the 7th and 8th floor of the Graduate Library. If they let you out of work, you could go down there and check it out. After graduating, I had no clue what I was going to do next. I mostly just didn't want to go home. In order to not go home, I needed a job. I'd driven a cab while I was in school part-time. That wasn't all that much fun. One of my roommates was waiting tables in a restaurant at, I don't know what it was, 4th and Liberty. That's not there anymore. And I went in there looking for a job as a server, and they told me they'd call me if something opened. And I waited 2 weeks, and they hadn't called me. So I went back and I reapplied as a busser. And they said they'd call me, and I waited 2 more weeks, and they hadn't called me, so I went back and offered to do anything, and they asked if I wanted to wash dishes, and I said sure, and that's how I got started. So I wish I could tell you some wonderfully glamorous, entrepreneurial story of a childhood filled with great food, and my mother was an amazing cook, and I knew from the time I was 10 I was going to have my own place, but none of that is true whatsoever. My mother was a good person, but not a good cook, and I grew up on, I always say it's the mid-20th century, but I think they still sell it all. Kraft macaroni and cheese, Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, Pop-Tarts, Tang, Nestle's Quick, Cocoa Krispies, Cocoa Puffs, all that stuff. So I had like zero culinary upbringing whatsoever. And really no one in my family was in business. They were all teachers, doctors, lawyers, psychologists, dentists. So I was like the total failure of the family for not getting an advanced degree. And in hindsight, I have more empathy for my mother's angst after I had 4 years of out-of-state tuition at Michigan and then got a job as a dishwasher. But anyway, so that's how I got started. I just really got lucky because I stumbled into work that I really love and into great people. So Paul Saginaw, who's been my partner and all this from the get-go, was the general manager at that restaurant. Frank Carollo, who's one of the partners at our bakery, where all those things that you, I think, are you eating all those pastries? Where those, they might be gone. Are they gone? So one thing is you can keep eating while I talk, because my whole day is spent talking to people that are eating, and it makes me nervous if you're not eating, because it's a sign that we're headed to go out of business. So anyway, and then Maggie Bayless, who's one of the partners at Zing Train, our training business, who actually I was just talking to on the way here, was a cocktail waitress. So I don't know why we're all in there together, but we've now known each other probably twice as long as a lot of y'all been alive. And that's a really good problem to have, and I feel fortunate for that. So I started, Frank started teaching me how to prep and how to line cook, and I started managing kitchens, and I worked for that restaurant group for about 4 years. Paul left about halfway through that and opened Monahan Seafood Market, which, if you don't know it, is still one of the best fish markets in the country, over in Carytown. And fall of '81, I reached a point which is not uncommon in the world, where it's not like I hated going to work and they were not a bad company, but I was just sort of less and less inspired by what I was doing, and I could sense more and more clearly every week that where they were headed organizationally, you know, with food philosophy and leadership philosophy, were not where I wanted to head. So I just decided I was going to give 2 months notice. I didn't know what was next. And Paul called me like 2 days later, and he said that there was this little building coming open near the fish market. How many people have been to the deli? Almost everybody. Okay, so he had grown up in Detroit where you could get good deli food. In Chicago you could get it, but you couldn't get it here. So we decided like in a week we were going to open, and 4.5 months later we were open. Which I don't really know how we did it, because today it literally can take 4 months to get a meeting set up when we're both not doing anything. But anyway, that's how we started. So that was March 15th, 1982. It was me and Paul and 2 employees in a space smaller than this room. And today we have like minuscule by Google standards, 700 employees. Plus we hire like 300 more at the holidays for mail order and for the bakehouse. And, you know, like we're tiny by your standards, but large by ours.
So starting off as a dishwasher with a Russian history degree from UMich and understanding how to be a businessman in the restaurant industry, what got you into writing books and becoming an author?
Well, I started writing, I don't know, it was probably mid-'80s, because I was frustrated with the people who were writing our newsletter for us, and I'm sure the fault was mine, not theirs, but it just wasn't saying things like really the way I wanted them to get said, and I think one of them gave notice, and so I decided I was just going to do it by myself, and that's how I started writing. So I never intended to be a writer either. I just needed to write in order to communicate what we were trying to do. So that's really how I got started. And then I wrote the newsletter for I don't know how many years, but I started to get really positive feedback from people, and I sort of blew it off, and people kept encouraging me to do more, and then people started saying like, you should do a book, it's so easy, you already wrote everything, which of course is not accurate, but that's when you don't actually have to do the work, everything seems easy from the outside. But anyway, I had gotten enough encouragement that probably by like the mid-'90s, I decided that if I were going to do that, I needed to actually learn more about writing, because I didn't really know anything about writing in particular, other than, you know, what everybody in this room knows about it. And so I started to read books about writing. I got in a writing group, which was super helpful, and I did that for like 10 years, and over the course of that time, then we self-published a little book on olive oil and a little book on vinegar, which got really good response, and then that turned into Zingerman's Guide to Good Eating, which came out with Houghton Mifflin, and then it all kind of went from there, except I didn't really like the big publishing world, and so after the Guide to Good Eating, we pretty much pulled back into doing all our own. So we do all the design, we print them here in Ann Arbor. I'm not a big Amazon fan, so we try to stay off of there, and it's sort of the farm-to-table version of books. So it started with food writing, and then I wrote a book about customer service, and then I wrote a book about bacon, and and then the leadership books started actually as articles, which then later turned into books.
Awesome.
So now there's a lot of books.
There are a lot of books. So speaking of those books, you've written a series of 4 in your guide to good learning. Awesome. Well, we'll be on the lookout for those.
Okay.
So some of those, to just give a name to them, are building a great business, being a better leader, managing ourselves, and lastly, which is your most recent book, The Power of Beliefs in Business, which is our focus for today's talk.
Okay.
So can you tell us, where did the idea or inspiration to write a book about beliefs in business come from?
I can. We don't have a little white sheet though, do we, to draw on? We do. Right over there. So I'm going to show you what the inspiration was. But,
yes, please do.
It sounds weird because I speak all over and I teach a lot, and we teach a lot internally, but I had actually never thought about the impact of beliefs on really anything up until I discovered, thank you, this cycle, which I'll show you. And so when I talk about beliefs, like I'm not talking about religion, sports, and politics, which are the 3 areas of belief that people go on about incessantly, although no one ever changes their belief, they just talk about it. But this is about beliefs, like, got a little pen too? Perfect. It'll work. This is about beliefs, like about what we believe about human beings, what we believe about computers, what we believe about the price of a cup of coffee or a brownie or whatever. So I learned this cycle from Bob Wright, who's in Chicago. And he can't remember where he learned it, so I don't really know who to give ultimate credit to. One of you's thinking, like, I'm going to search this later. And you're going to email me this afternoon and tell me where it came from. But anyway, I look forward to it. It's a self-fulfilling belief cycle, and it kind of blew my mind when I learned it from him, and it turned into a 600-page book because I kept studying and studying and studying, and I just kept realizing more and more the impact it was having, and I realized it was going on all around me and all around us every day, and that it had an enormous impact on our organization and on my life, and that basically, because of what we believe, we are mostly creating what happens around us. So, ready? We all have beliefs. Based on what we believe, we all take action. So literally every action that we take, including y'all coming here today, me coming to talk to you, Dominique initiating this conversation, every action we take is based on what we believe. Okay? Based on our actions, the people around us start to form their own beliefs. And based on their beliefs, they in turn take action. And what blew my mind is that like 95% of the time, their action reinforces our original belief. And this is going on all day long, all over the world, everywhere. Okay, so two really quick examples does this make sense? So two really quick examples, one organizational. So if you were to have a leader of an organization, probably not yours or ours, but where the leader, CEO, founder, whatever, he or she doesn't believe in training, what action would they take? This is where you talk, even though you... They deprioritize, oh, there's a good word, Mara, deprioritize. So they deprioritize training. They don't do any training. That we say they don't do any. That's, we're not as advanced. So when they don't do any training, what do the people who work there start to believe about the organization's belief in them, about the possibilities for the future, et cetera? There aren't any. When they believe there's no positive future at hand, what kind of work do they do? Bad work, very good. They deprioritize their work quality. And the CEO or the leader goes, thank God we didn't waste any money on training. Look how bad these employees are. Okay, if you flip around the belief of the leader, then you get what we do, which is whatever, 75, we have like 75 internal classes that we teach in our organization. So not the same class taught 75 times, 75 different internal classes for a pretty small organization. What do the people who work there start to believe?
They can improve.
They can improve. What else? They're valued, absolutely. What kind of work do they do? Really good work. And we go, this training rocks, let's do a lot more. Okay, the irony is it's exactly the same employee base. All that changed is the belief of the leader. The results are the opposite. The people are the same. This is all that changed. Okay, on a super simple, seemingly stupid interpersonal situation, has anybody been in a work situation where two people weren't getting along? 6 of you have? Okay. So let's just say that Billy believes that Alice is kind of a jerk. How will he treat Alice when he comes near her? Poorly. What will Alice now believe about Billy? He's a jerk. And what will she do when he comes near? Treat him poorly, and he goes, it's worse than I thought. If Billy changes his belief and he says, you know, I'll bet she's just shy, she feels awkward and uncomfortable. I remember when I started how overwhelming it was. It's hard to get all the personalities down, etc. She's probably a totally good person, but she just is anxious. Now what might he do when he comes near her? He might be nice, welcome her, introduce himself. Here's my email, here's my card, whatever. What's she start to believe about him? He's a nice guy. You're getting it, man. Keep it going. Now what's she do? When he comes near, how's she treat him? Great. And he goes, see, I knew she was a nice person. She was just anxious. This cycle is going on all over the world. Countries go to war over it. And that's not an exaggeration. Okay? So this whole thing blew my mind. And once I started to realize this was happening, then I realized my own beliefs were getting in the way. Because the reality is, where do y'all think beliefs come from? It's not Amazon. Yeah, so we're not born with them. Beliefs are not genetic. It's all learned behavior. We learn from people we trust. So when we're little kids, we don't know enough not to fully trust our parents, so we just take everything they give us, and it's true, and we believe it. Then as we grow up, we start to get other inputs. So it could be a teacher, it could be your minister, it could be a TV star, an athlete, an actor, your best friend on the playground, your best friend's parents, whatever it is. But all of those beliefs are being formed, right? And so we start to take on information. Sometimes it's through books. That's how a lot of my beliefs were formed. So it could be from people we never even met, right? But the thing is that we have the power to change our beliefs. So what's happening here is changeable. It's not genetic, right? And two last things, and then we'll move forward.
It's fine, go ahead.
So I started to break beliefs out into three broad categories. Well, I started to think about beliefs as the root system of our lives, because you can't see them. But you're guaranteed what's happening below the ground is 100% correlated to above. So negative beliefs, neutral beliefs, and positive beliefs. And if beliefs are the root system, it's not rocket science. What kind of outcomes do you get from negative beliefs?
Weeds.
Negative outcomes, weeds, exactly. Neutral beliefs don't do much. Positive beliefs create positive outcomes. So the reality is that I started to realize is it's totally impossible to get positive outcomes from negative beliefs. And that's true socially, it's true interpersonally, it's true in your family, it's true of yourself. And so then I started to realize I need to change the negative beliefs I have to positive ones, which doesn't mean there's no problems. It's just you could have positive beliefs about a problem or negative ones. And then the last thing is just for the moment in here is there's a little filter that we all have, which is that we filter out all information that doesn't support what we already believe. And we seek out or take in information that supports what we already believe. And that's why when you read the news, half the country arrives at the totally opposite conclusion of the other half of the country, even though they read exactly the same story, because they filter out, they find evidence to support what they already believed in the first place. And this is going on all day long. So that's just the beginning. But there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did that make sense?
Wonderful, thanks. So off of that, I guess, encouragement to change our beliefs, to think more positively, to root ourselves in positive beliefs, what advice do you have for us when maybe we start to doubt those beliefs that we've formed? We start to maybe not believe in the product, the person, the organization. How do we stop that and prevent it when it happens?
Well, I'm not saying you shouldn't doubt it. I mean, it could be that there's good reason to doubt it. It's just to explore the doubt. You know, Rollo May, the very fascinating to me, at least, mid-20th century psychologist, said the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And I think that's true. And so I think part of what happens is that beliefs become commonly accepted and then they go with the flow. So, I mean, this is true all over the world. So if I have a lot of, like, your beliefs can change, but they won't change until you come in contact with information that's incongruous with what you already believed, right? So that could be true personally, like you could have stereotyped somebody very easily. Things like racism, anti-Semitism, these are all negative beliefs that are socially supported in many communities, and it's not, I don't believe people set out to do ill, but that's the belief that's all around them, and that's what they grow up with, and that's what they accept as the norm until they get themselves into a different context. So I have a lot of, through Southern Foodways Alliance, which is a really great nonprofit. Like, I'm from Chicago. I mean, in hindsight, I had very negative beliefs about the South. I mean, because I grew up in the civil rights era. I wasn't, coming from Chicago, like going to the South was not something I would really have imagined. But through Southern Foodways Alliance, has really changed my beliefs in hindsight about the South, and to understand the real diversity of what's going on and to understand the culture more in depth, et cetera. But anyway, I have a lot of friends from there who said that they grew up in, as their parents grew up in very racist settings, and I said, well, what happened? And they're like, well, my mom said when she went to college, it totally changed everything. Why? Because if you grow up in a town where that's the norm, why would you question it? you hear it from everybody you know, everybody you look up to, and then when they got in a different setting, they realized, the falsity and negativity of that belief. But until some other input comes in, you don't know enough to question it.
Thanks. So is there a consequence to positive beliefs? Is there a way you can overdo it, and how do we balance that?
I think that my point is not to be Pollyanna, so I'm not saying there's no problems. I just, like I said, I think that you could have a positive belief about a problem or a negative belief. So, one of the stories I use for that a lot is the story of Food Gatherers, which is from before y'all were here. But, in 1988, there were a lot of people going hungry in Ann Arbor. So a negative belief would have been the system sucks, society sucks, people are selfish, this is hopeless, there's nothing we can do, it's horrible. A positive belief is the one that Paul had, which was this is horrible, but we can use what we learned in business to create an organization that'll actually do something about it. And that organization became Food Gatherers, which now delivers like 5+ million pounds of food in Washtenaw County. So the problem's the same. It's just the negative belief leads to more negativity. It's accurate in many ways, but it's not leading to a positive outcome, whereas a positive belief about the same situation can create something meaningful. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know, there's no black and white answer to what's real, right? So if you study, I didn't study existentialist philosophy, but we might not even be here right now, right? But it's like what was once considered completely impossible is now considered normal. Witness what y'all do every day, right? So, when you go back in history, things that we take for granted were not common. American women who married were no longer legally allowed to be teachers up until like the 1920s. Right, which sounds insane, but that's what it was. Native Americans didn't get to vote till I think 1927. So, there's just all sorts of things in history that, when you really go in there, that people believe to be normal and appropriate that now would seem completely crazy.
So, switching gears a little bit, there's a large theme in the book surrounding hope. Can you speak about how we make hope happen?
I can. Well, hope is another subject that I really never thought about. Obviously I know about it, but it turns out that we can actively create hope, and we can often unwittingly crush hope. And it turns out, from now having studied it some, that not shockingly, people with low hope don't do good work. You all and we all are in a very high hope setting. With all of the not inappropriate conversation around privilege and everything in society, what I've sort of come to realize is that the two things you can't overcome, you can overcome all the other bias if you have, a little bit of support, and a lot of work, but nobody can overcome lack of positive beliefs, and nobody can overcome lack of hope. So when you have no hope, you'll never do work because there's no point. And unfortunately, a lot of workplaces, leaders are unwittingly smashing hope. Some of them might know they're doing it, but a lot of them mean well, but they don't even know they're doing it. So then I started to look at how do you go to the positive, which is how do you create hope? Because most of us in this room are coming from high hope settings, and so we take it for granted. And I started to look at hope metaphorically like the sun, because when there's no sun, nothing grows, right? And so the 6 things, there's a essay on this hope star, because sun, star was too hard to pass up, going from memory. So, the first is to help people see a more positive future. Right. The second one, though, is to see paths to get to that future, because if you could see a positive future but you have no clue how to get there, it's just magical thinking, and it doesn't actually help anybody. And it turns out high hope people have multiple paths to get there. Low hope people will often have one, and then something goes wrong, and then they see it as the end. So in hindsight, the story of me applying at that restaurant 3 times is an indication that I grew up in a high hope setting. because somebody from a low hope background would be equally skilled as I was, which wasn't particularly skilled, but they would be equally skilled as I was. But when you're coming from a low hope setting, you would give up. Whereas I just figured, whatever, I got to get a job, let's go back, right? And so I'm guessing that's true for a lot of people in here, because we have this advantage socially of being raised in high hope settings, because we're surrounded by high hope people. So first is better future, second is how to get there. Third thing would be to see how they matter as human beings. So this is not connected to what they do for a living. It's just that the person, he or she themselves, are important, right? The fourth is how their work matters. The fifth thing is to help people see how the little things matter, because high hope people do the little things. And that's actually what gets you to success. The low hope people keep waiting, you know, in essence, to win the lottery of life somehow, waiting for the right person, waiting for the right job, waiting for the right agent to, you know, whatever. Whereas the people with high hope tend to do the little things because they believe in a more positive future. And the sixth is to see how we fit into something greater than ourselves. And that could be an organization, it could be a department within an organization, it could be your family, it could be your church, it could be, you know, any group that you feel a part of. But everybody, I think, wants to be part of something greater than themselves. And if you think about it, I realize there's a natural tension between you matter as an individual and you're part of a group. So there's always this creative tension. So when you look, like in history, when you look back at like fascism or communism, they were extreme examples of where you fit in the group, but you don't matter. So the individual in those contexts is completely irrelevant. It's only about the group. So the key is to try to have a creative tension where the individual is important and the group construct is also important at the same time.
Amazing, thank you. So going off of beliefs and having hope and nurturing hope, having leaders invest in creating hope, why isn't everyone already doing this? When you go train for Zing Train and talk to smaller businesses about these concepts, what is the biggest pushback? Why is this so difficult?
I don't know that we get a ton of pushback. I mean, the people that come to us are already have some inkling or belief that there's some merit to it, or else they wouldn't come. Ironically, of course, the people who need us the most are the least likely to come. Because they believe, like, why would we go to Zingerman's when we could go to Harvard Business School or whatever, you know? So I think it's just, Gustav Landauer was a very interesting anarchist, German Jewish pacifist, was kicked to death by the German army in 1919. And in one of the pieces that he wrote, he said, people ask all the time, why don't people already do all this stuff? And he said, they don't do it because their parents didn't do it. You know, managers learn from other managers who learn from other managers who learn from other managers. In the same way that stuff becomes the norm, they just have that belief that that's okay. And then also out of ignorance, like, I mean, I don't know, there's not a lot of books out there on hope in the workplace. So like, where would people have heard of it, right? So, you know, and I guess what I always like in my context of food, I mean, if you never had a really amazing oatmeal raisin cookie, then the one they sell you at the 7-Eleven tastes totally fine, because that's the context that you have. It's only when you experience something in the quality of workplace and the quality of relationship and the quality of, you know, human interaction that tells you there could be more, that you go for more. When everybody around you hates their job, when every boss you had treated you badly, when everybody's image of beliefs about work is it's a total drag and you shouldn't have to do it and you only have to do it if you're too poor to not do it, then the odds of getting a great experience are almost zero. But once you start to experience something else that's more positive, then you don't really go back. But I think even with all that, I mean, most people in most organizations just aren't thinking about it. It doesn't come up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now you're thinking about it.
I am, actually. I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit again. So just for some context, all of us here are very client-facing, and we deal with people all day long.
You are, because you're looking at me, and I use your stuff.
You got it. So Zingerman's, again, has been coined as like the biggest, cool, small company in America. And can you tell us a little bit about how customer service weaves into this story and
Yeah.
what businesses can learn from a service industry like Zingerman's, and how we can use that in our day-to-day roles here, even
Yeah.
at Google.
Well, we didn't bring it today, but I wrote a little book about service too. But I think service is service. I don't think it matters whether you're online or you're, selling, rice from a street stand in Jamaica. I mean, I think it's all service is service. So I think really all of what we do, whether it's the stuff on beliefs, on hope, on customer service, on visioning, on open book management, I mean, they're basically just universal human principles. And I think that adopting service as a life approach is actually the key, because when we live service as a strictly just to get money, it's like marrying for money. I mean, in theory it could work, but the odds of it being well, I mean, it's not emotionally sustainable over a long period of time because you don't really believe in it, and in theory it got you what you wanted, but you feel hollow inside because you're not pursuing what you really are aligned with ethically and spiritually and soulfully. And it's the same with service. So I think most of us, Mara could add in if she wants, but I mean, I think most of us that work with the service approaches, it just becomes how we live. And I treat my girlfriend in the same 3 steps to great service that I would use with you all, and it's just because it's a nicer way to live. And I think in that context, in hindsight, you're probably going to get to it because you've done such a good job of reading, but the spirit of generosity stuff, so it all feeds with service, right? So service is spirit of generosity, and when we choose to live every day and every interaction as best we can and perfectly with the spirit of generosity, then I think the world goes better, and I think our lives go better as the people doing it, and that is what service is. So in the book, there's 3 steps to great service and 5 steps to handling complaint, which is basically a recipe to actualize what is a good intent, but most people don't know how to make happen. So yeah.
Awesome. So off of that, all of us have had those interactions with customers where we weren't even mean to them. We were the nicest we've ever been, but we can't control how they react.
We have those same ones.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's yelling, there's nowhere productive, the direction of the conversation is not productive. Like, what is your advice in being in this business of service to kind of get back on your feet after those interactions? How do we keep going and living a service-driven life?
Well, it's hard. It's still, I think, so in the first book, there's an essay called 12 Natural Laws of Business, and one of them is that strengths lead to weaknesses, and also vice versa. So if you care a lot, then the weakness is, that's a strength. The weakness will be that it's hard to not take it personally. If you really don't care about the customers and they act like jerks, then it's just a self-fulfilling negative belief, and you're like, I knew they were jerks, whatever, who cares? So I think, I don't know, I mean, my dog died 3 years ago and she was 17, and it totally sucks, right? If anybody's been through that, it's the worst. And but the alternative is not to care and not to have had the good relationship, and it's the price of having the good relationship is that the pain is connected with the positive. So I guess it's just finding ways to self-manage, which is the third book. For me, it's the things that I do. Try to be around good people. So, who can I talk to that's going to help me reground? I can't always do it, but running, I run every day. In fact, I'm leaving here to go run. Helps me to reground. In the old days, I don't actually have an office or a desk, but I used to stash positive thank you notes and stuff that people had given me. Like, I would leave them in my mailbox so that then I just had stuff laying around. I mean, there's just little things that can help. Breathing helps a lot. There's no right way. Like, I'm an introvert, so I generally want to get away from everybody. Some of y'all are extroverts, so that's the worst thing you could imagine. But the point is to know yourself well enough to know how to reground. And, it's easy for everybody to say don't take it personally, but if you care, you're going to kind of take it personally. It's just, And then this taught me actually to remember that they're not jerks when they do that. Most of those people are just having a rough time. And I try to remind myself what's true, which is I only had to deal with them for 20 minutes. But in all, and I'm not being flip, but I mean, they got to live that way the rest of their life, or at least they've lived that way their whole life. And the people that are close to them are dealing with that every day, and is way worse than the little snippet that I got stuck with.
Thank you. So lastly, on customer service, can you touch on a little bit about what fairness is in customer service? I actually did read. I did read your customer service book. So can you talk about fairness? I think that was an awesome concept.
Well, I realized that we all grow up, or most of us grow up with this concept that life's supposed to be fair, and we spend a lot of time when we're little telling our parents that stuff's not fair. And anybody done that? Anyway, but then I realized, like, with service, it's not fair because of exactly what you just described. And you or I could give amazing service and we could get treated really badly, having nothing to do with us or the content of what we provided. It's just what's happening. And it could be that that person's significant other is in the emergency room and they're flipping out. It could be that their mother just got diagnosed with, I mean, anything could happen and we don't really know, right? So we started to teach people that fair is another planet and we're not on it. And that if you need things to be fair, service is the wrong profession to be in, because I think in the long run it's going to work out for everybody for the better, but in the moment it's not really fair. And you know, it's just the way it works, and we can't control anything, let alone what the customer does.
Great. So in the books, you have sprinkled in a lot of exercises.
Yeah.
So I was hoping that maybe you would be able to pick one of your favorites, and maybe we can all take a minute to take a stab.
Oh, wow. Very good, Dominique. Okay. Do y'all have something to write with?
This is tech. Just kidding.
Do y'all know each other? What should we do? 3 and out? I was going to have them do this, I believe. It's kind of hard to do without writing, though.
Or maybe just talk about it and something that we can hold on to and practice later.
Okay.
Just thought it would be fun for.
Okay, so this, I believe, is in the new book. I named it after the 1953, I think, CBS radio series with Edward R. Murrow, which became an NPR series also and came out in a couple books. But it's basically a way to tap your beliefs about anything, right? So the exercise would be just to sit down, or I guess you could stand up, but to sit down and for like 3 minutes, list as fast as you can write everything you believe about any situation, person, or whatever is in your mind. So if you have a situation you're struggling with at work, at home, interpersonal, project management, whatever it might be, like do like 3 minutes, and the faster you write, the better it works. So don't think about it, write. And then it's just interesting what will come out. The reality is, because of what I already told you, what you write today will be different than what you would have written yesterday, which is okay. But just the more we learn, it changes. It's already changing your beliefs based on that little interaction. So that's one that I would really, I've started to do it like for anything I'm having a challenge with, because in the beginning, you know, I'm better at it now, but you just realize, like, I have negative beliefs about whoever, my cousin, my neighbor, whatever it might be. And it doesn't mean you have to change them, but it just means if you want a different outcome, it's unlikely to arrive without a different set of beliefs. Internal training at Zingerman's.
Internal
not
training.
My own training.
Yes,
myself.
yeah.
I have that too, but yeah.
For your employees, what are some other ways you inspire positive belief amongst your employees, because they are so super friendly and like seem to stick around for a really long time?
Well, I think there's no one thing. I think that's really the point of the books, is that from studying the anarchists and restudying it actively over the last 5 or 7, 8 years, the world at large is looking for, the world at large has been trained to think hierarchically, and I guess, I don't know if this is like antithetical to the Google algorithm, but so So when you get trained to think hierarchically, I'm not saying you're doing this, but the world at large is looking for this singular answer. They want to know your biggest success, the key secret, the biggest failure, what's the number one thing, and I think that thinking is the biggest problem. Because I started to look, as per the idea of beliefs as root system, I started to look at organizations as ecosystems, and in nature there is no hierarchy. It's actually unnatural to create hierarchy. And so I think in an ecosystem, in nature, in a healthy ecosystem, everything matters. Seemingly small things matter far more than you might imagine, like bees, which by weight would be infinitesimal but have an enormous positive or negative impact, and that looking for one singular thing doesn't work. So I think getting people in a healthy ecosystem, I'm sure you're experiencing it kind of here because you have friends who don't work here and they have a very different work experience. Treating people with dignity and respect from day one. So again, you know, maybe it's my anarchist thing, maybe it's something else, but I'm not any better than the newest dishwasher that we hired. They know a lot I don't know, and you know, they have a lot of good ideas, and I don't know what they are yet. So, you know, I think that matters a lot, teaching all this stuff to everybody, so you don't have to be senior management to learn about this stuff. We just try to teach everybody. We're open book. I think just by teaching people about beliefs, then it's not like people go, I'm going to have a lot of negative beliefs today and see how that goes. Like, they don't even know they have beliefs, right? So they're not trying to do ill, they just don't even know. So I think all of that's happening. We give copies of the business books, you know, if people want to read for no charge, really. And then I think culturally it makes an enormous difference, like who you're around. So it'll come up in the culture now because people who have been there will say something. So all that and more. Hi.
Hi. So I was at the Roadhouse, and I was with family from out of town, and we loved the experience. My niece ordered a bagel, and it took like 30 minutes to come, and that was kind of a terrible experience, and they kind of left feeling negatively about the server. I had a great experience with the server because he said, you know, he brought the check and said, can I get you anything else? And I jokingly said a shot of whiskey. And mind you, it's noon.
Right.
He came back with a check and a shot of whiskey. It was great. And so I'm just curious from a coaching standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. If you're the manager or the person on staff and you witness something maybe here, like a discrepancy in how a server handled something, and you see something bad versus something good, what do you do to then inspire hope or remedy the situation or coach when you witness this happening?
Well, with the bagel, I don't know what happened. I mean, there's 1,000 things that could have gone wrong. I mean, and inevitably they happen. I mean, as frustrating and unfortunate as it is. I mean, is that what you're asking about that, or you're asking about that he gave you whiskey?
More from a leadership standpoint, when you notice an employee, you know, made a mistake, you know, kind of in the
I think
positive
partly
belief about a negative situation.
Partly is to normalize mistakes. So, like, I make 100 every day. I think, you know, one of the fallacious beliefs that American and probably all societies, most societies create is that leaders aren't supposed to make mistakes, which of course is stupid because we're all making them all the time. And with all due respect to those of us in formal leadership roles, we don't really know what we're doing either. But so I think it's never giving feedback from some sort of, you know, hierarchically superior place. It's just like, this is what I noticed, in the same way they're going to notice stuff that I didn't do well. And then more to focus on the positive, and we have a ratio that we recommend of 4 parts praise to 1 part constructive criticism, and that was supported by a study which some people later doubted the data, but intuitively makes sense to me, which is the Losada study, L-O-S-A-D-A, where they found all successful organizations had a minimum of 2.9 parts positive communication to 1 part criticism. That was the minimum. So I think focusing on the positive. So if I knew who gave you this shot, I would give them a big compliment, because it takes guts to do that, and that's what we want people to do.
Yeah, it'll stick with me forever. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Did you drink it?
Oh, absolutely.
Ari, the Zingerman's company's got so many great companies. There's bakery, restaurant, printing press, etc., training. How do you take an idea and how do those get started? Like, if you have an idea, there's not a great home delivery food company? Like, what do you do with that?
Well, so for a business, the ideas really come from the person who has the idea. So I have a million ideas. I think the ideas actually are super easy and not hard to come up with. The hard part's who's going to do it for 20 years. And so what we found is it's easier to find the idea than it is to find the person. So it's really comes like Miss Kim is our newest business, which is our Korean restaurant in Carytown. So that's probably 5 or 6 years of work by Jihei, with us to get to where we opened. And that process includes writing visions, which would be another way to focus on the positive that I didn't mention before. A lot of interactivity, because when you're working collaboratively, you need to be able to incorporate other people's ideas, yet stand true to your own, et cetera, and that's how they come. Internally for smaller things, I mean, the biggest thing is there were a few of those bottom line change pamphlets over there, so we have a change methodology. And because a lot of our approach is to teach everybody how to lead from the minute they start working and not wait until they get a title, which doesn't really mean anything, that the idea is that when somebody has an idea that they can lead the change. Now, they may not be the decision maker, but that doesn't stop them from leading the change. And so my job becomes to coach them in how to lead the change, not to implement their idea for them, which is, I would suggest, very parental and paternalistic and not very helpful. Like, it's better than not implementing their idea, but I think the real thing is to learn how to lead, and the pushback is like, well, people aren't going to listen to me. I'm like, dude, they don't listen to me either. That's what leadership is how do you get people on board, because there's always resistance. So that's the two, for a business and for a smaller change.
Thanks for coming today.
Thanks to you for coming today.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. It's clear that the culture, the beliefs, the people are core assets, but I would argue that one of your biggest assets is the visual design brand around Zingerman's. The font, the posters, the illustrations.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how do you keep that thriving?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you. Well, strengths lead to weaknesses, and weaknesses can lead to strengths. So when we started, we had no money. Today, everybody could do food photography, and y'all could have in this room at least, you could have a website up by 3 o'clock. But in those days, we didn't have any money. So food photography, like, it used to cost $10,000 to have somebody come for a day and shoot food photography. So we just had our friends and whoever was working there start making stuff by hand, because that was what we could afford. And then we just basically used what's now called found materials, like cardboard boxes that the lettuce came in, to make signs and stuff. So that's really where it came from. And then, it evolved over time. That handwriting is the handwriting of a guy named Steve Muno, who worked for us for a long time. He's long since moved on and is a very nice guy. But that was his handwriting. It still is his handwriting, and Mara can do it, I think, but I am not able to, but many people learn how to do it. Probably, I don't know when it was, 10 years ago, the artist succumbed and allowed it to be made into a font, although they are adamant, and I agree with them, that I can tell the difference when it's been done by hand and when it's been done off the font. But the font is helpful for somebody like me who can't reproduce it, and I'm in a hurry doing some whatever. And then as we grew, then we we unwittingly fell into the problem of the look that had become the norm at the deli started to get not reproduced in the other businesses, which led to a lot of frustration. And then realizing, from working with Maggie at Zing Train a lot over the years, she's taught me, like, when you have a big frustration with somebody, it's almost always because you have an unspoken expectation. And then the challenge is to look inwards and figure out what that unspoken expectation is. And then it was like, well, yeah, this is the way Zingerman's needs to look. And then being able to then teach that more actively and train people in how to do it. And then within the context of the Hope stuff is use one look for the whole organization, but then allow each business to have its own manifestation of that within the overall look, so that you can honor the individuality of the business but not lose the coherence of the organization overall.
Beautiful. As a design guy, I loved hearing that. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, I have the epilogue. The epilogue of the new book is about my belief that business is like art, and that done well, it's good art, and done poorly, it's bad art. And so that really all of the things that go into design, I think, go into making a healthy organization.
be our last question. Go ahead, Harris.
Wow, a lot of pressure.
Harris, man, no
Yeah, I know.
pressure
So
at
my name's
all,
Harris.
dude.
A lot of pressure. So when we were talking about the belief thing, I was just curious from your point of view. I feel like it's very common for all of us, as you were saying, to kind of fall into the circle. How do you go about identifying when you kind of fall into that rut, whether it's you or someone close to you?
Yeah.
And then to quick follow up to that, like how do you mitigate that to change the path of the circle?
Well, there's a recipe in the new book for how to change a belief because it's easier said than done. If you've had a belief since you were 6, the roots are very deep, and they don't change easily. And this is why you could see it in society all over the world. I mean, people will hold to their belief even though the evidence clearly shows it's wrong, but they'll hold to their belief anyways, right? So, when was it Copernicus or Galileo when he said that the sun didn't revolve around the earth, which now we go, oh, well, of course the earth revolves around the sun, but they used to believe the sun revolved around the earth. So when he wrote that in his book, the Catholic Church said, well, you can't write that, it's wrong. In the Bible it says it's the other way. And he said, yeah, but this is what's true. They said, we don't care, you have to take it out. So when people have held a belief for a long time, generally they will work really hard to maintain the belief in the face of all sorts of evidence. I think for me that this just showed, it just made me, get myself to almost automatically go like, what do I believe? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I believe they can't do it. Well, if I believe they can't do it, they're doomed because if I'm their manager, they're not going to succeed. So then I need to re-examine my own belief. In terms of other people, here's the thing, is you can't make anybody change a belief. It's an internal process. And part of what tends to happen socially is people argue with others that they should change their belief, which I would suggest just makes the roots go deeper. Even if they're wrong, it just makes the roots go deeper. And this is why this is the national political scene right now. It's just like no one's going to change their mind. The roots are just going to go deeper and deeper. And I know where I stand, but it's not going to convince anybody else to change their mind that doesn't agree with me. So I think in the end of the day, all we can do is model and share information and hope for the best because you can't force anybody. I have the most impact on my own self, and that's really where I can make a difference. And if I change my beliefs for the better, then it might change 2 other people, and it might change 2 other people. But I don't think there's no global universal solutions. There's just people.
Can we give Ari a round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you.